Well, welcome, therapists and private practice owners. We are here to talk about the issue of not getting your intake paperwork complete and maybe not seeing as many clients either show up to session one or continue on after session one. So whether you're a solo or group practice, whether you're trying to save your admin time or yourself money, or you're just trying to retain clients for longer with better therapeutic outcomes, that's what we're going to be diving into today. We've got four massive takeaways that are going to really help you transform how quickly you get intake paperwork and disclosures, all of that fun stuff back, as well as some great tips on how to increase show rates to session one and really therapeutic like matchup to get them to session 2 and 5 and 8 and beyond. So if you're ready for that and ready for that improvement process, let's go.
Yeah, I think we have to get started with improving the paperwork process. Um, Collecting paperwork is a pain in the butt. Nobody likes it. The clients don't want to do it. Your staff doesn't want to have to hound people down. I think when I think of collecting paperwork, um, it's kind of like you got a couple options. You have the person come in and they just scramble to get it done before their session, and then they waste half their session doing paperwork. Or you reject people. You reject people because they couldn't complete their paperwork before their first session, or it actually works out and they actually fill out all the paperwork and it gets done and everyone's happy. And then I think maybe the last option might be they see all the paperwork and then they decide to drop out because it was just such a huge, heavy load. Uh, it's just one extra reason to procrastinate. So why not? Right? They're doing you a favor by spending money on therapy services, or they're, sometimes they spin it that way. People can spin it in all kinds of weird ways. So with those kind of scenarios in mind, how can we optimize to either get paperwork faster, so like get it complete earlier in the process, make it more convenient for your clients and for your staff, and just improve the overall experience. And I think one of the easiest ways is to kind of get some of the paperwork started on the call with the admin. And so what that might look like is send the paperwork out while the admin or intake coordinator is still on the phone with the client, and then have the client pull it up, maybe fill in a couple fields. Josh had mentioned some awesome points on the newsletter today about how can we spin a negative into a positive. So how are we explaining, maybe I'll let you explain that too. How are we explaining what the paperwork actually is, and how are we defining it or setting the expectation for our clients? Because if we're telling them, hey, before you come in, we need you to sign your life away, no one's going to have a fun time doing that. But if you explain it in a different way, where maybe this paperwork is critical to do some pre-work before they pop into their first session, or maybe this paperwork is going to be really helpful to save them money because they're not wasting their time. Some practices have their first session cost more, and maybe your session doesn't cost more because it's not an hour and a half, because they didn't have to do all this extra paperwork time or anything extra up front. So you can kind of spin it accordingly. Josh, I'll just take it.
I had a sister a couple of months ago. She was looking for some services for one of her kids. And she texted me because she found a practice that she really wanted to go with. She reached out to them and they sent her back intake paperwork. This particular practice required that you complete this intake paperwork before they would even kind of run like a consult, but really more schedule you for a first appointment, which a lot of practices do that. They want the intake paperwork before they'll even put the appointment on the calendar, because they have such bad throughput issues, meaning that they schedule that appointment and the paperwork just never gets done. So their only solution is to say, no, we're not going to schedule your therapy appointment until the paperwork is in, which it makes sense, but you are putting a massive burden on potential clients. This particular paperwork, we're asking things like all of her insurance information, her disclosures, things like her license information and some of that stuff. And so to not have very much trust for the practice, to not have an appointment on the calendar, to not It was a very shocking thing. This was one of her first experiences to try and pursue therapy, especially for one of her kids. And she reached out to me being like, hey, is this normal? Is this appropriate? Is this odd for this practice to do it this way? And I'm like, a lot of practices do it this way, but yes, it's odd because that was a very negative experience for her. And when you talk to a lot of people as they're going through your intake process, they will actually describe it as a negative experience. And we need to turn this negative experience either into a neutral, hopefully a positive experience. And how do we really do that? The first thing is, and Attilio was hitting on it, is just communication. Are we being clear and talking about it? Are we going past the just blunt, hey, we need this paperwork before we can schedule your session? Yeah, that's fine. Are we preparing people for what's inside of that paperwork? Things like, are you telling them at the top of the email that links the paperwork or on the phone call what's inside of the paperwork, what it asks of them, like what information they need to have? Hey, have your license and your insurance information ready to submit, things like that, and how long it would perceive. Hey, this is a 5-minute form or a 10-minute form. Preparing people will make them feel prepared to do it. So that way they don't open it up, get super overwhelmed by the information, set it and forget it. But if you saw a bullet point list right at the top of the paperwork and at the top of the email and said, you need this is how long it will take, and here's what happens as soon as you hit submit, you are going to be much more likely to feel safe and normal completing that paperwork. But there's one last piece to this, which is that kind of takes it from a negative to maybe a neutral experience. So the person at least has eyes wide open. But how do we turn it into a positive experience? And this is the questions we ask. How can we make doing this intake paperwork a benefit to the potential clients? What do your clients want more than anything? Or I should ask you that, Attilio. What do clients who are potentially trying to enroll with a therapy practice want more than anything?
I think they want to get the help that they want
Right.
at the in the financing method that they want, and in a convenient way, right? They're
Yeah.
asking for help and they want help and they need help.
They want their service. They want help. That's what it comes down to. Doing intake paperwork is not getting help. That is only a benefit to you, so that way you can bill insurance and have them in your system and make sure that you have legally covered your butt. So clients who feel known, clients who feel seen, clients who feel that your therapist is prepared for the first session, that will make them feel like they're going to get the help that they need. So what are 4 to 5 questions that we can put at the top of the paperwork or in the middle of the paperwork? Tell our clients we are going to ask these questions of them. We're talking maybe some family history, some questions about what they want to get out of therapy, therapeutic goals, other things. And this is wrapped into, in a very honest way, hey, when we get this information, this prepares our counselor to ask better questions and do a better intake from session 1. So then the motivation of then completing your paperwork, when this is communicated in the emails and the website and in the physical phone call, your admin have, hey, by the way, we're going to send you some paperwork. There's 5 really important questions that we need you to fill out, and it will really help your counselor, Sally, to really ask some great questions and get started with helping you or your kid or whatever in session 1. It's going to ask a couple things like this. By the way, you'll need some insurance information and your driver's license and a couple other things when you complete that paperwork. But the sooner you get that back to us, the more lead time that our therapist has to kind of prepare for that session. When do you think you'll be able to complete that? That's the vibe. That's the language. That's the help to increase and turn what is typically a very negative experience into a positive experience.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you too. The more that you can do it, meaning your intake coordinator do it, the better. So if you can just have them walk through, especially if you have a good like document management system and you're prepared to send out documents and you understand maybe how or what documents you need to send to each client, there's no reason that you can't just pull up the information while you're getting that first session booked and maybe even go through some of the initial disclosures or some of the initial
Yeah.
items. it's very common. It's a very common service to just get the person acquainted with the it's a common service in the sales process, which is your intake elements, to just go through some of the elements of the contract and the paperwork and the things that they're signing on, and the onboarding elements. And so I think as the practice, it's good or helpful to set higher expectations around what elements your team actually does, because you'll get
Yeah.
more out of it. And we've seen some practices fully stop, like get to a standstill where they have people hitting their paperwork pending stage and literally nobody passes through their paperwork pending stage. And so, like, literally, this can completely break your intake process if you're not catering to your clients. And I
Yeah.
want to take a couple seconds to talk about the toxic trait of a lot of private practice owners. And this toxic trait is the thought that if someone doesn't go through your paperwork, it means that they weren't a serious client. That is a toxic trait of private practice owners that I think is honestly the silliest, most ridiculous business owner thing I've heard and seen. And I see it very frequently. It's this idea that, oh, someone filled out a form and so they must not be serious, or they're not qualified, or they're not the right fit, or they're not XYZ. It's like, no, your process is just really bad. Your process is just really bad. It's not conducive. And maybe you're marketing and doing intakes for people who are a little higher up in the sales process, which means maybe they need more information or need more time before they make a decision. But that doesn't mean that they're not serious people. And it does, and I would take it as feedback that your process is bad. I would take it as feedback that your process is bad. And
It made
so
me
this is a really toxic trait. I'll share one last point, because sometimes I'll see forms on websites even that are like all of the intake questions. And it's like, who is that serving? Do you need them to shop for their person? You need them to understand their diagnosis. You need them to understand all the extra elements for therapy and the intake process. That is not serving you, and that's not serving your clients. And so,
yeah.
how can we provide a service in our intake process?
Made me think of the comedy Nathan For You. It's the comedy show, and he worked with a business owner to put an insane discount on TVs, but you had to show up at a certain hour of the day, dressed in a full formal tux. You had to crawl through a mini door and get past an alligator in order to grab the TV and get the discount. And that is the equivalent of what a lot of the intake processes are like. And I think the cost benefit to fix this, you have to spend money to acquire a client, to acquire a lead, to acquire a conversation. And if we have 10 people a month, 5 people a month that we can work to convert off of a better intake process, that is 5 more leads, 5 more sales conversations that we don't have to go and spend extra money on. So especially if you're a larger practice who have 1, 5, 10, 20 pending slowed down intakes on a monthly basis, speeding up this process will save your admin time, aka you money, and then it will also save you marketing dollars by converting more clients. There's a couple other points that we want to get to today. There's a really fast one on just automating reminders. There are a number of softwares out there. Some of the EHRs actually don't do this really if you're building their intake paperwork, but there are other softwares. I think Intake Queue, as well as like the Therapy Flow CRM that we have. There are ways to, once you send the document out, for them to get like an email and text reminder every 24 hours or once a week or once a month, whatever, and kind of pepper them with some automated actions. It's no replacement for human engagement, human service, human process. Don't over-engineer the process, but getting cyclical reminders rather than sending it out once and just hoping and praying that it gets done can be helpful. I want to move into talking a little bit about the intake process from the perspective of getting more people to show up to session 1 and more people to show up to session 2. For us, a retained client is a new client, because most therapy practices will lose money if the client only shows up to 1 session. meaning you went through all of your marketing dollars, you went through all of your admin dollars, you went through all of the intake process, and now they've showed up to session one and you have the cost to deliver the session. Well, you add all of that up, you're probably not going to make profit or much profit on session one. And so what that really means is we need them to stay until session 2 or 5 or 8 before we actually start making money. So optimizing your tracking, your accountability, your process, your metrics to include the stick rate can be a huge piece that will make your practice more profit and benefit your clients because you'll get better outcomes.
Yeah, I think of I see so many counselors right now talking about the negative. I guess this isn't right now. I think it was a sticker shock when it first happened, and now it's pretty much normal and nobody really cares too much about it. But I think of like good faith estimates when this was like required, and everyone was like, "What's it going to mean? We're going to lose all of our business." And I think this is a really great way to actually set awesome expectations for your clients and talk about the fact that, hey, by the way, therapy works when you do it for longer. Like, are you committed? What's the reason why you might not be committed? Why wouldn't you stay for this many sessions? What are some of the obstacles? And just talk about some of those things and analyze maybe the gravity of the client situation. And it allows you to maybe put a little bit more focus on what does the whole process look like instead of the first session or just cooling down after a heated session with their partner, or what does the actual process look like and feel like, and how can we set great expectations before even the first session so that people are more inclined to stick around for session 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 100.
Yeah. I see a lot of therapy practices. They are trying to spend as little time completing an intake or sales process to get someone in the first appointment, as little time, as little resources, little energy to get that first appointment. And it's kind of the wrong perspective. This person is going to potentially spend $1,000, $5,000, $20,000, either them or their insurance provider inside of your practice. Slowing it down at certain segments and doing what Attilio just said of having of asking those questions. It's what you want. You want them to have clear expectations for themselves and their therapeutic outcomes, but sometimes clients need help doing that. So setting great expectations before setting session one is kind of step one for this. Two other quick tips for this. If it was my practice, I would make every single therapist send a welcome, like a manual welcome text message for any client that gets assigned to them prior to session one. Just for, hey, I see that you're on my calendar for this week or next week or whatever. So looking forward to connecting with you. And if you guys track it or you have good information, that therapist can also say, hey, so look forward to working with your kid or working with, this topic or this thing that you mentioned. How would you feel if you got that text message? You'd be like, oh, great. I've got this appointment on the calendar and this therapist knows, sees, understands, is ready for me. Hey, I just got your intake paperwork. Excited to review these questions and dive in with you. It will, if you have 1, 2, 3, 5 intakes a week on a new therapist counselor calendar, that's not that much time. That will take less than 10 minutes the entire week for 5 potential clients. You just have to make it a requirement. Likewise, after session 1, make your therapist send another text message. Hey, or email. Hey, great session. It was so lovely meeting you today, connecting with you. Really looking forward to next week's session or whatever it is. And don't even need to ask for feedback or anything else. But again,
Nope, I think we lost Josh. Let's give him just a second, see if he pops back in. So yeah, just sending some welcomes, some hellos, some goodbyes can always be helpful. Really, you just want to bridge or create some continuity. Obviously, don't put anything that would violate HIPAA in these messages. That's not what we're encouraging you to do. So just be conscious. Maybe don't say session inside of your message, but I think having some kind of bridge there is very helpful. And then I think just creating a stickiness. So I think we always talk about having the therapist end the conversation or end the session and then rebook, what is your therapist rebooking rate? Do you have eyes on that? Do you have visibility on what the rebooking rate is? What does that actually look like and feel like for your practice? And so have some quick conversations on those because you will want to set a key performance indicator around the continuity. And then finally, last element is train the team, right? You aren't going to be able to keep expectations, set expectations, meet and exceed those expectations if you're not sitting down, training, having continuous conversation around what the expectations are, how the expectations can be met, and then how the expectations can be exceeded. So these are all really, really important when it comes to continuity, completion, and throughput for your clients. Josh, we just got back. I just hit on really quick. Don't send text messages that aren't HIPAA compliant. So make sure that those are good. And then talking about training, setting, meeting, and exceeding KPIs around the rebooking rates at the end of session.
Yeah, 100%. Bottom line, you have to invest in your team as well in this process. The text messages is one tactic of training your team to have really good success in this area. But investing in your team in general, every time you onboard new clinicians, revisiting this quarterly, annually for best practices, monitoring underperforming clinicians, and setting better and new expectations will all be things that really help with this process. Bottom line is your intake is the first experience that clients are having with your practice. And if your intake is a negative experience, your therapists have so much work to do to overcome that and build rapport and reset a positive expectation as they get into sessions. And so I think a lot of practice owners are trying to spend as little time as possible on the intake process, when in reality, if we build a better sales and intake process with clearer flow, more positive experience, better expectations set, it solves so many downstream issues, and it creates a lot of positive word of mouth experiences because your potential clients and your actual clients will talk about therapy most when they're first getting started. Hey, I had this call with the therapist. They're telling that to their friends and their family. Hey, I just started sessions with a new therapist. People talk. That's the bottom line. They talk to their closest friends and they talk to their closest family members, and they're going to share positive experiences. They probably won't share neutral to a little bit of negative experiences, and they will share very negative experiences, just like my sister did. Optimize your practice for positive experiences, and you'll see word of mouth referrals and community growth happen.
I don't think I have anything else to add. Do you?
Good luck, guys. We'll see you next time. Cheers.